revenge, Jesus turns those things upside down for them. And he has just laid out this set of beliefs that changed significantly how they are to live their lives. And then he tells this parable of the wise and the foolish builder to help ground them. In the parable of the wise and the foolish builder, Jesus tells the story of one who builds his house on sand and one who builds his house on a rock. And the house is a metaphor for the teachings of Christ. And he tells this parable after the Sermon on the Mount, which is a collection of his teachings that ultimately end up kind of upending the Jewish traditions, the Jewish teachings of the time and how they understood them. His audience was Jewish at the time, and they would have known basic Jewish teachings, what they'd been taught their whole entire lives about loving their neighbors, about oaths, about adultery and revenge. Jesus turns those things upside down for them, and he has just laid out this set of beliefs that changed significantly how they are to live their lives. And then he tells this parable of the wise and the foolish builder to help ground them. And the application that he mentions in verses 24 and verses 26, this is in Matthew 7, he says, "Therefore, anyone who hears the words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who's built his house on the rock. But everyone who hears the words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand." In other words, Jesus is teaching that to follow him is not just about belief, and it's also not just about actions. Many people believe that we can follow the teachings of Christ without claiming Christ as Lord and Savior and still be considered a Christian. More specifically, they think that it means that God's okay with them, that they're in a good enough place with God that when their lives end, God will welcome them into heaven after their death. And to follow the teachings of Christ, though, without Christ is like Jesus is saying, it's like building your house of mud, which is what the homes were made of back then, is building this house of mud on a bed of sand so that when the waters come, the storms rush in, it's going to collapse. Those teachings will hold you up for a while, but when things get tough, when the waters come and the winds blow, things will fall apart. And so if you've built your life on this idea that we just have to follow the teachings of Jesus and not Jesus himself, you might start to question what you believe. Wait, I've been a good person. Why would this happen to me and not, the other guy down the street who's way worse than me? The teachings, the beliefs suddenly don't feel like enough. And that's because they aren't. But I'm a good person. I hear people say that a lot. I don't hurt people. I don't lie. I give money when I can. I don't steal things. Christianity is not a rewards-based system. We can't have Christianity without Christ. To merely follow the ethical teachings of Christ, many of which Jesus has just laid out in the Sermon on the Mount, he's saying is as if you were to build your house of mud on a foundation of sand. We can't have Christianity without Christ. But we can't have Christ without his teachings either. Jesus just spent several chapters in the Sermon on the Mount teaching about the ethics of Christianity, the nature of living it out. And all those ethics mean nothing without Jesus. That's the foundation, the rock that he's talking about. But just saying that you believe in Jesus, saying you trust the rock, that's not enough either. To be a true believer of Christ means you don't have one without the other. The whole point of this parable, which is used at the end of a whole bunch of teachings about what it looks like to be a Christian, is that we can't have Christianity without Christ. But we can't have Christ without his teachings either.